Kramnik is somewhere, just seething right now. You just know it.
Hyperventilating. Do the procedure. Do the procedure.
Daniel Naroditsky is the greatest chess commentator that ever lived. Yes, you could make an argument for Robert Hess. I mean, you can't even spell chess without Hess. But Danya is the GOAT, in my humble opinion. And so it was sad to hear recently that he's thinking of stepping back from the mic a bit in the coming months, years. Who knows, right? We hope not too much, but in large part it's due to the current world champion all up in his head. Horrible to see for the last 12 months. We hope Danya can get back behind the mic in our favourite tournament soon. But it made me want to do this video, a tribute to a great chess player as well as commentator. This is a game he played in the recent World Rapid event 2024, and who does he take down in astonishing style? The world number something, I forgot, but really strong player, Nodirbek Abdusattorov. I mean, he's like top 10, put it that way here. Nodirbek had black, Danya white. Let me bring this keyboard closer and we're diving straight in. So e4 from Danya, best by test. c6 starts the Caro can't in the hands of some, but I'm sure not Nodirbek. We get this advance in the center and an exchange variation, solid as a rock. These ponies develop into the game, and normally moving one twice is a boo-boo, right? You should get your bits out in the opening, but this sets up aggressive ideas, thrusting pawns, or after knight c6 you can get the game continuation where you just put this huge pressure on the light squares already, and bang, you pick up that bishop pair. Lovely jubbly. But after this pawn structure emerges, we can see why Nodirbek not too fussed about giving up the light squared bishop, and his knights can hop in this relatively closed structure. We get castles, bishop d6. This knight hits the game, castles, quick king safety fist bump, exploded out. Great etiquette by the players over the board. And after rook e1, this queen sets up the battery, pawn's gonna drop, so g3 blocks the way. Now you create that Swiss cheese on the light squares, but you've got the light squared bishop, not the opponent, so not such a big deal. This rook develops. Now the knight comes to f3, but it leaves the e4 square. I mean, this is the push-pull battle, right, of a game of chess. You come here, I go there, potato, potato, boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew, and after the pressure's now put on e4, you could simply take this one off the board, but we see the much more double-edged pawn f5, and it speaks to the fact that Nodirbek is about 100 points higher rated, the stronger player. He wants to keep pieces on, tension, mix things up here. Do you want to dance? Danya says yes. The queen comes streaming out, threatens maybe not checkmate, but something horrible. So g6 is played, laterally opens the defense, hits the lady. This is no time to Botez gambit, so queen h6 is played, and after a6, putting the question, I did a ton of clicking here to understand why the natural bishop f1 spinning round isn't best. This is preferred, but then this and then this. What's the big idea? Well, ultimately you play against pawn e5, or if an immediate e5, there's even some exchange sack ideas, then bishop b3. This is relevant because Danya goes here as mentioned, tucks back into bed, but then e5 comes. Great move, liberates this backwards pawn, and because the b3 bishop's not out here, you haven't quite got the same pressure. So after takes on e4 played, this one looks kind of natural to keep the diagonal closed, but Nodirbek takes with this one, obviously just looking to set up that connect 4, knowing that the prize today is a role play Lord of the Rings day out with Hikaru. I mean, wow, what a prize. That is precious. He wins it for himself, but after this threat now of bishop c4 check is on the way, you have to respond. Now Danya doesn't do it immediately because you can step to the corner, and if you go like this to set up these horrible threats, you're just in time to cover with the bishop, bounce round, this sort of thing. Game goes on. So we jump back. Danya goes bishop g5, and he sets up this mammoth threat, then followed by the bishop g5 stuff. So this one looks so natural, right? Spin around, defend the king, But again, Nodirbek is in full let's go crazy mode. He goes queen f7, really mixing it up, covering bishop c4. But what are you doing after pawn b3 played by Danya? Given the question mark, by the way, because d5 was preferred, but okay. b5 now feels natural, but not played. Instead, we get this awesome move of takes on d4, and this mixes everything up because after bishop c4, about to win the queen, rook e6 is the move played, intercepting, and the whole point of Nodirbek's is, yes, I'm about to give an exchange here, but look at my knight headed to e5, or if you take on d4, I'm headed there. And how are you going to protect the f3 square once this bishop leaves the board? I'm going to win an exchange or more, big attack coming, easily compensation. So that's why Danya goes bishop f4. If you were to go knight e5 now, he'd be chopping it off in a heartbeat. Plus, he's actually threatening to win a bishop. The rook couldn't take, the queen would drop. Now, you could take, but instead we see bishop f8. Again, plays with the theme of complexity. This queen drops back here, rook a8 doubles, very natural, and the best move here is actually takes on d4. You do invite this stallion into the center of the board, but you can tiptoe to the side, a check is landed, king goes, different game. Technically you can get away with it. This is one sample line, we won't go on. This is a monster though. Gives black the compensation for the exchange, which will soon drop. Not played though, no takes. Instead, we see a move of pawn g4. I mean, that is wild and unexpected. It's like seeing Danny Wrench rock up to a game of chess bingo in his bathrobe. You just don't see it every day. You're not even quite sure where to look. What to play here? Well, if you take, not actually good, because the white king's exposed, but the queen streams into the game, supports the bishop, and you've broken up your pawn chain. This is the problem here. It's actually good for white, or better than what was in the game, possible for black, if you take here. But it wasn't played. We're in the back cave once more. This was actually good, because if queen takes bishop b4, ouchie, and if the queen doesn't take, what else to play? Rook ac1 potentially. But okay, the knight's coming to d4, you've cleared the square, you've won an extra pawn. This was the best way to go. But Nodirbek plays pawn d3, creating the passed pawn, also really natural, but now we get takes on f5, capturing with the queen is best, because otherwise there was king h1, rook g1 stuff, whoops, going for the check, and with the queens on the board it's dangerous. So this is how the game proceeded. Now we see rook a d1, very natural, king f7, and f3 looks to break up the pawn chain, so this check was landed. Now you should actually just move the king. This bishop is a really important blockader. It's on a very nice diagonal, but Danya does this, getting a little low on time, and it allows black to play this really shifty move, go back like this, threatening f4. The bishop can't bounce back. You have to actually exchange, and look at these pawns now. Look at this knight, really nice position for black. But missed. We get takes. Now the rook recaptures. Quite fascinating, by the way, that the one time Nodirbek doesn't keep the pieces on the board, takes them off, it fires back against him. His mushrooms went wrong. So king f6 now played. Breaks the pin. So finally we see the captures here. Rook takes back. This one doubles. You could go d2, but then you just come back. You round it up soon. It's not ideal. So instead we see b5, and it burns 2.5 minutes. You can tell Nodirbek not quite sure of how to proceed, how to get this knight into the game. If knight e5, well, there's ideas of taking and the pawn dropping. Not that you don't have to watch out for tactics, but this was played. King g2. Not the best moves now, but we're going to crack on, because before Danya can do anything else, we see Nodirbek push p, c4 is played in response, and what you should do here is knight d4. You finally centralize. I mean, it looks like that was what he was trying to achieve. However, you have to calculate this. You're not just sacrificing a pawn. Well, here's the point. Knight c2. whoops, not that one, this one, you go to Forktown, population Danya, and yes, you can do this. Here's a sample line, but you pick up the exchange. Black gets enough play despite the active king and passed pawn, and this is blockaded. Black's got their own runners as well as white having some too. Some kind of rough equilibrium, but anything could happen. Knight d4 the move. However, I mention that because they're very stinky. Pawn f4 is played and it gets the double question marks of doom. Now here's the point. After takes on e4, rook takes, you have to capture in the right manner. What do you do here? How to play? Have a quick think if you want to do so. And if you would have taken with the rook, then you really ought to be leaving an apology down below, because look at that. The butt flap falls out of stockfish. Not a fan, because the pawn runs and you can't get back. You can't get back over here. Knight covers the square. Very nasty. A baby girl's about to be born. So that's why you have to go with the pawn. Played in the game. King e5, very natural. Danya now steps in. Not precise, because you run into this check. But even after the king steps back, the game still hangs on a knife edge. I mean, knight e6 apparently best, but this is very tricky stuff. Yes, it blockades, it covers a pawn, but this one also natural to go for the attack. But now there's this rook g1 move. Good, but missed. Rook d1 played. The pawn drops. Looks terminal for white. You know, can't the king march in, escort the pawn? The knight's tricky, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's counterplay with one move and one move only. It's the advance of the c pawn. It just gives enough of a distraction. So knight e3 is a great move. Hits this rook. Don't go rook c1, you run into d2. So rook g1 switches over. Now if d2, no good, because you get c6. It's running very fast. We won't go down the whole line. What was played instead was king d5, best move. You could now invade with the rook. It's the top way to go, swing to d7, but instead we see king e1, and it apparently blows the white advantage, because now black can take the pawn, and these two still very dangerous, even though you're in exchange down. The computer gives it level right, but anything could happen here. However, pawn not captured. Instead, we see a huge blunder on the board here. Is pawn to f3. I mean, is he really one of the world's top 10 grandmothers or a very naughty boy? This throws all the advantage back to white, because what Nodirbek's missed here is this powerful king f2. You stop the advance of the pawn, of course, and if black tries to advance this one, take it through, well, you just chop the knight. Suddenly you've removed the defender. Of course, white can take and everything, just not working. Neither pawn's running. What to do? Say you capture here, knight drops. This is now the problem. Completely lost. So that's why we see the move of king d4 covering the knight. But of course, the pawn now runs. Knight d5 blockades. But now check. King here. Check. Supporting the pawn, running the king in, but now we get rook d4, not even pushing that pawn, going for more, right? Why let the knight capture the pawn? Instead, try and eliminate the knight and then let the pawn run. So that's why knight b5, that's why rook b7. About to chop it, run the pawn through. And if you try something like knight d6, let's say, hitting the rook and covering the square, trying to do that sort of thing, well, white can now take here, covering b3, and what to do? You're in a complete paralysis. You know, where's the line? Something like this, let's say. You just can't do anything. The king marches in, knight goes at some point. Here's a sample checkmate even. So let's run back. This is the threat here. No knight d6. Instead, we see king takes on b3, but Nodirbek resigns before Danya can execute this move, which he went to play. This is winning because after takes, you run through, of course, and black is just nowhere near in time. You know, something like this, let's say, and you pick up, you run this, etc. All game over.
And trust me, it's an absolute banger. It's a game changer.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Lock. This is first what I do.
Great game by Danya. He went top of the tournament at this point, couldn't hold on, but wow, what a tournament he had in Rapid and Blitz. Hope you enjoyed this one, and have a look at the video on screen if you want to see an incredible game by Magnus Carlsen, played in the Chessable Masters last year. That tournament 2025 starts this week. Hope to see you soon, and cheers.